We've now covered a very important part of what this course had to offer, creating a basic humanoid action figure which can stand, move and orient itself like a human being and has proportionate joints which are very rigid, and it's able to orient itself in any direction you want it to. Now that you have an understanding of the basic construction of such an action figure using just cotton thread, you can start envisioning your own character design and then use this technique to see what that would look like in an action figure form. What you're seeing in this montage right now are some of the character designs that I've made in the past using just this technique, all of these using just thread. While in this video series we've only covered the basic humanoid structure, you can see in some of the designs that this technique need not be limited to only making human or human-like characters. Whatever design or action figure that you have in mind, you can construct it by building the individual parts and then connecting them together. Now, you might also want to consider adding other features to your characters, wings, tails, weapons or any other props. And in this video, I'll quickly cover how you can construct all of those things. To show you what I mean, I'll use one of my previous action figure designs as an example, taking this dragon as a sample because it looks completely different from the action figure which we've designed in this course. However, the underlying principle of construction is exactly the same. Straight away, you can see that it's a lot bigger than the action figure that we designed today. And you can choose the size of your action figure that you have in mind, basis the individual parts and how big you want them to be. Case in point, when we made the fingers of our action figure, we chose to tie 2 threads in a knot. Here, the fingers are much bigger. These might have 3 threads or 4 threads. So that automatically makes the fingers bigger, which therefore makes the hand bigger, and then proportionally you can see that the rest of the entire figure is going to have a much bigger size. It also obviously doesn't have the same proportions as our action figure, and as you can see, it's a dragon. It's not meant to have a humanoid proportion. But as long as you have an overall understanding of the construct of your character, you can construct any kind of body part using thread. Now, thread by itself is incredibly flexible and forgiving, so you can orient it in any manner that you like. Like for example, this 3-part leg which I had constructed specifically for this dragon, based on my understanding of how this hind leg should be designed. Similarly to this hind leg, I'll cover each of the parts that we've made on this dragon, which are different from the action figure that we've made over there, to illustrate how this thread technique can be extremely versatile. Starting with the tail, for instance, you can think of it as an arm with 1 finger and no joint in the middle, no elbow joint. Therefore, this is one long column without any knots in it. And the wrapping of thread over it need not be as tight, because unlike the arm, which needs to be very rigid and unbendable, this has to be extremely flexible as a tail. So since we want this thing to be flexible throughout, we need to tie the knots and the wrapping around it very loosely. So as you can see, I'm able to bend it anywhere across its length. Now if you compare that to its leg, that is extremely rigid, because all of these columns have been tied very tightly, but that's not the case for the tail. It's a similar story with the neck. Much like the tail, it also needed to be flexible and bendable across the board, across its length. Now in the case of our action figure, the neck was not as long as that of this dragon, so there it didn't really matter. However, the exact opposite is true for the action figure's horns and its claws. Not only do the horns need to be rigid, but they also need to have a texture of something that's bony and solid, unlike the arms and legs, which can feel more muscular and fleshy. So which is why, if I zoom in here, you can see that aside from being really tightly wrapped, the horns also have been covered with glue over them visibly to give them that kind of right texture. Same goes for the claws. These are made from the bits of thread that we leave at the end of each finger. These were glued together and then clipped at the end using a nail clipper, not a scissors, to give them that kind of curved orientation, which is similar to that of a reptile claw. And it's a similar story with these scales. Each of these scales, as you can probably make out, is a pair of thread that has been tied together on the back of the entire dragon. We have glued all of the threads together and then clipped them at the ends to give them that kind of curvature that they have. Coming to the jaw, if I show the underside in more detail, you can see that I've made a column of thread, this U-shape orientation over here, wrapped over it and then folded it on itself to make this kind of separate movable piece. See, the point here is that using thread, you have a lot of opportunities to improvise and adapt until you have the overall design and construct which you need. That could be a humanoid like the one we have made today, or that could be completely different from a humanoid like this dragon that you see over here. You can come up with your own ways of constructing the parts that you need for your character, and it's very forgiving to work with. Now, as we reach towards the end of this series, I'll cover some of the pros and cons of this technique in the next video.